Welcome back to Movement Paradigm Podcast, the podcast that discusses movement, mindset, and manual therapy. Make sure you check us out on Instagram. That would be at Movement Paradigm Podcast. YouTube is going to be Movement Paradigm Podcast. Give us a follow, give us a like. That would be greatly, greatly appreciated. If you're on YouTube right now, take a second and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. It definitely helps with the episodes coming out in the future. All right, today we are talking about yoga. Yoga has been a part of my life since about 2008 when I did my first yoga class. Me and my teammate of mine, I was playing baseball on Vancouver Island, and we were trying to find a way to recover our bodies in between pitching outings. So he found this hot yoga studio at the chiropractic clinic that we both were patients at. So we grabbed our beach towels we had and we walked over there. I quite literally had a camping mat that you would sleep on as my yoga mat, which did not work at all. But we champed out our first class. It was very ugly. And I continued practicing yoga off and on up until this day. And I found it very rewarding. As far as mindset goes, I'm a big fan of the breath work, and then the restorative nature of some of the classes has been very valuable to me. I am far from a yoga expert, I'll be the first to admit, but luckily my guest today is Leah Graw, is from Calgary, Alberta, the beautiful Calgary, Alberta, where she practices as a yoga instructor, what she's been doing for the better part of a decade. She's also a manual therapist, practicing as an RMT in the area. Leah is a Yin Yoga specialist. That is her area of focus. She's also trained in vinyasa and critical alignment, but she's all about restoring and maintaining tissue health, which I appreciate. In today's society, tissue health is often overlooked. Usually people are looking at strength, or they're looking at, how you look in the mirror. But focusing on tissue health, also very important. Then you get the mindfulness and the breathing of a yin practice. So yin is a little bit different. There's a yin and a yang style of practice. And yin is going to be more slow. It's going to be 5+ minute holds. It's designed to stretch your fascial tissues. And then the yang practice is your more traditional, if you don't know anything about yoga, yang is going to be that more fast-paced yoga style. So Leah Graw sat down with me for about half an hour. She's a very knowledgeable human being in the area of yoga. And if you are thinking about getting yoga into your life, why don't you check out her Instagram at Leah Graw Yoga. She has full yoga classes posted up there for free, so you can follow along. I think most people can benefit from adding at least a little bit of yoga style movement in their life. So if you have any questions, make sure you hit her up on Instagram. Please give it up for Leah Graw. Leah, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
I was super excited to talk to you. You have a couple different roles, but I wanted to thank you for your work in preventative healthcare. Lots of times I'm treating people and they're always focused on, tissue strength. They're focused on what things look like, but it's very uncommon for people to focus on tissue health if they're not recovering from an injury. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. I'm happy to play that role. I think that it's something that people need to pay so much more attention to. I think a lot of times that, until it's really dire, we don't pay enough attention to our bodies.
Yeah. So how would you describe what you do? I know you have several different roles, but just broad strokes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I teach yoga and I try to educate people about what yoga can do for their bodies. And then, of course, I'm also a manual therapist. And so I try to just share with people how maintenance can really be one of the best things for them as they seek optimal health in their life.
Hmm. So, how has it been treating in Canada? You're in Canada, in Calgary, Alberta. How
Yeah.
has that been through this past year?
I would say here in Calgary, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster, as I'm sure a lot of people can relate. The massage therapy here is actually not regulated, meaning that we are not part of the healthcare industry. And so when we've went through our lockdowns, which has happened a couple times now, unfortunately we haven't been exempt from that and we've had to close our doors. And I think that for people who really rely on massage therapy to treat some chronic pain or even address their mental health, it's been really challenging to take away that ability to be consistent with coming for their treatments.
Hmm. So, what would you say is your biggest challenge thus far during the whole shutdowns and everything? What was the biggest challenge?
I think that for me, on a personal level, it's been really hard to have this lack of certainty because I think as humans, we really want to, get a sense that we're in control and maybe we have a little bit of an idea of what's going to happen tomorrow or a week or a month from now. And because of the nature of this pandemic, we really haven't had that sort of feeling of security. And so that can evoke a lot of fear because we don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Hmm.
And I think that's been really challenging, but also something that's been a great learning opportunity for me because it's taught me to be able to pivot and sort of let go and just kind of go with the flow for whatever the next day holds.
Yeah, complete acceptance to the moment is something I learned.
Yeah.
So for me, I think I appreciate people a lot more right now. I've always been kind of an introvert, so now, like when I had to go through my first span of like 3 weeks with no human contact, I was like, oh yeah, people are pretty important to my happiness. So that was a silver lining I had. Any silver linings for you?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate to that. I'm kind of on that brink between introvert and extrovert, but when that ability to connect with people is completely taken away, it really, you know, it allowed me to step back and think about how important it is for not only my mental health, but I think for everyone else's. And obviously, being in a role with yoga and massage therapy, where one of my main sort of positions is to connect with my clients and to listen to them, trying to pivot and even do that type of thing online, which I was able to do a little bit. It's really not quite the same. And so now that we're able to reopen, we've recently reopened here in Calgary.
Mhm.
So we're kind of back into the regular flow. I do have that new appreciation. I really look forward to going and connecting with my clients. And I think that I'm all the more present with them.
Cool. Yeah, that gratitude that this could all go away in a second because it pretty much did. Yeah, that was a pretty
Oh
tough
yeah.
time for especially your profession. So, how has your business kind of changed? You mentioned pivoting, so you went probably like more online.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not something that I ever really thought I would do is to start to, create pre-recorded content. And now I run yoga teacher training. So we are able to move those fully onto Zoom. And it's been a really interesting transition. I've definitely learned a lot. And although I had some apprehension at first, I wasn't really sure how that connection piece would be because a lot of what we do is based on observing each other's bodies and touching each other and just like, having these sort of deep discussions. But I was actually really pleasantly surprised because we were able to have this whole other element. There was a lot more flexibility because we ended up recording all of our content. And so our students who were joining us were able to tackle this training even if they, work shift work or they couldn't like put in that consistent timepiece, they were able to watch it afterwards. And we were also able to access people who lived in more rural areas who just don't have those types of trainings in their towns.
Mm-hmm. So, as a manual therapist, as a yoga
Yeah.
practitioner, what are your goals as you educate people? What are you trying to get out of them?
You know, my focus is always on empowering my students and my clients. I think that we, and myself included, have really learned too little about our physical bodies. And so, if we don't have that awareness of what's going on inside of us and our own anatomy, it sort of leaves us at the mercy of the different practitioners we see. And so, what I see happening is my students will come to me and my patients will come to me, and they've been to all these different modalities. Like they'll go to their chiro and they'll tell them one thing, then they'll go to physio and they'll tell them something else. And they end up with all these sort of pieces, and none of them are wrong. They're just different people looking through different lenses at their problem and offering them solutions.
Hmm.
And so they sort of end up overwhelmed. And, you know, when we're overwhelmed, we can kind of lack the ability to act because we don't know which direction to go in. And so through slowing down and really listening to our bodies and their own individual needs, we can start to get those answers as to what might serve us and which things really aren't going to work for us, and we can just kind of brush aside.
Yeah. So, you specialize in Yin Yoga, correct? So, what?
Yeah, for sure.
For people that don't know what Yin Yoga is, what would you tell them?
So, Yin Yoga is a slower type of yoga. And I'll kind of start with the three main principles. So, if you know the three principles of Yin, you can really intelligently navigate through your practice. So, we call them tattvas, which is just Sanskrit for principles. And the first one is to find your edge in a pose. And so, what this looks like is you come into a yoga pose and you want to move into about 80 to 90% of, you know, your ultimate depth. And so it kind of involves some moving in and some backing out until you can find that happy place where you're feeling some sensation and maybe some discomfort even, but it's not so much that it becomes unmanageable for you or causes a lot of like disruption in your breath or your mind. And then the second principle is to find stillness. Stillness is really important because we really aim to actually relax our muscles in Yin Yoga so that we can get deeper into the what we call Yin tissues, which is essentially our connective tissue. So these sort of deeper layers within our body. And in order to really stimulate these, so our fascia, ligaments, tendons, our joint capsule, and even our bones, we require our muscles to relax. And so for this to happen, stillness is really key.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third principle is holding for time. And so that's one of the big differentiators between your yin practice and your more fast-paced yang practice. It's that we hold poses for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. And again, the reason for this is because we're looking to target different tissues in our bodies. So if you were to say, go to the gym, you would know that to work out your muscles, you could do something like repetitive and rhythmic, like lifting weights or, you know, doing some squats. Whereas our yin tissues, they respond in quite a different way. And so they need that element of time to start to relax, to open, and to find that optimal health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I did at your body shop, right? For your
Pardon?
what Yin Studio are you in Canada?
Hot shop.
Hot shop. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did probably, I want to say 50 classes there, and most of them were Yin. And then I found that as I was going through the class, it was way more of a mental struggle because you have that like 6 minutes where like lots of thoughts can happen in that time. So I found that
Yeah,
very valuable.
absolutely. And a lot of people have mentioned to me when they come to Yin that they actually find it to be the most challenging type of yoga, because I think that we're used to our minds being so busy. We're always interacting with thoughts and emotion and outside stimuli. And so when we finally come to our mats and slow down and turn inwards, it's sort of a new territory that we find. And it can be a scary place at first because it's all just sort of unknown, and it takes a little bit of courage to dive into that space.
So, what would you say are the benefits of a yin practice?
So there's a variety of benefits. Starting with the physical benefits, I would say the primary goal is to sort of exercise, you can think of it, your yin tissues. So it's the application of healthy stressors. So just like when you go to the gym, you might sort of like tear your muscles a little bit, and then they rebuild themselves and they're stronger. It's a similar idea with how we approach our yin tissues in this style of practice. And so in stimulating them through compression and tension. So, compression being like pressing them together and squeezing them, and then tension is pulling them apart. We're able to promote regeneration in those tissues and maintain and even regain some range of motion that we may have lost. And then, of course, as you mentioned, there's that kind of mental layer, which is more subtle, but can be equally as beneficial because we have time in our yin practice to develop introspection. So, that knowledge of what's going on inside of us. When everything else quiets, we're able to tune into more subtle sensations that we may overlook in the busyness of our day, or they might be kind of like drowned out by louder sensations if we suffer from pain or something like that. And so we can start to gather this information and use it to our benefit. And then, of course, in slowing our mind, we also slow our breath, and that can really do wonders for our nervous system, just calming us down and shifting into that parasympathetic state.
Yeah. You mentioned there's like this disconnect between like physio, chiro when they come in. So, if you were to speak to someone in your referral network, what would you want them to know about yin yoga? Like, who would be a good candidate for it? When should they reach out to you to help their patients?
I think that it's important to know that anyone can practice yin yoga as long as they understand what it's all about. And so when we are coming into our practice, we want to come to a place called U stress, so EU stress. And this is that kind of like this space where the stress level is going to be beneficial and not deteriorating. So we can always do too much to our bodies. And so something to note is that if you have an injury, that sort of place will move. And so you're not going to benefit from applying as much or even sometimes any stress to that region of your body. So, as far as with healing some sort of acute trauma, I would say that would be the one thing to really be aware of and avoid. But other than that, if your tissues are relatively healthy, you can, of course, come to practice yin as long as you do it in a supported and relatively gentle way, because that's how it's intended to be practiced.
Have you had anyone come in with like an acute injury and then they're like, my doctor told me to come here?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that exactly, but sometimes it's just this, the doctor will say, go to yoga, and it's very general. And I think there's a lack of understanding that, there's a variety of yoga, or even if they say specifically go to yin is sort of understood to be like slow and relaxing, which is very true, but um, it's not always the best choice. And if you are nursing some sort of injury, consider going to restorative instead. Restorative is not intended to create stress in the tissues in the same way that yin is.
Okay, so let's say I am me coming in to see you, and my goal is, Leah, you're gonna make me more flexible. Is that a thing that I should be focused on?
I would say yes and no. I mean, you can definitely find more flexibility in the yin practice. Um, I would recommend that you shift your mindset and think of the flexibility piece more as a byproduct of consistently practicing. Because what can happen when that's our main focus is we can end up pushing our bodies a little bit too far. And you have to remember that when we're holding these poses, our muscles are relaxed. And when our muscles are relaxed, we're actually in a vulnerable state because their job is to protect our joints. And so if you're in a relaxed, vulnerable state and you're pushing yourself in this very yang-like way, it can cause injury. So I would just say to you, I mean, it's not a bad goal, but have that patience and be gentle with yourself along the way.
All right. I like it. I like it. I get people tons. They come in and they'll give me feedback like, I'm a really bad breather. How do I become a better breather? Do you get that ever?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I definitely experienced for the first few years of my yoga practice. And I found myself practicing the poses and then breathing, and it was very separate. There was no marriage of those two components. And so I think that it's really common. You know, breathing, of course, is a natural thing. So we think it might be easy, but typically what happens is, you know, through our day, we kind of end up in this like hunched, less than optimal postures, whether it's at our desk or on our couch or driving our car. You know, we're always in that same spinal flexion sort of position. And so I would say that kind of two elements to improving your breath in a yoga practice. And the first one is to focus on your posture. So as soon as you straighten up, you allow your lungs to be open and you decrease any pressure that you might be causing through slumping. And that's something, of course, we work on a lot in yoga.
Mhm.
And then the second thing is to, you know, just be patient. It will come with time. And yoga is all about consistency and dedication. And so if you just keep showing up on your mat, it will come.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. If you just keep showing up, huh?
It's
That
like anything, you know, if you practice, you'll get it. If you do it, you'll be able to do
So
it.
like when you're doing a yang practice, I'm assuming that because yin, you're just sitting there for 5 minutes. So it's you're not moving. But with a yang
Right.
practice, you're trying to connect. If let's say you're doing like a standing series or whatever, you're trying to connect your breath with each movement in and out, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Generally, we use like our inhales to expand our bodies
Mhm.
so we can kind of create space and loosen up tension. And then as we exhale, we can like either ground or, you know, soften into different parts of our body that are chronically holding.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So what's your game plan from here? What's next as an educator? What's next coming up in the future?
Well, I'm currently filming a yin sort of like an online training that will be available. And I think that I'm just planning to, you know, keep going, kind of have that open mind, maybe a retreat in the future. We'll see how travel goes in the new year. And, I mean, I hope to just keep educating people and getting people excited about their own anatomy.
How do you want to evolve kind of yin in the area of public acceptance? Because I wouldn't say it's niche. It depends where you are. Here
Right.
in the Midwest, people don't really know what it is. How would you like the public acceptance to evolve? Because usually it's just yang. Like when people think yoga, they just think yang, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely gaining acceptance already because our culture tends to be very yang like. And that just means like fast paced, goal oriented. And so people are realizing that yin, whether it's like physically or mentally, can really be a great balance for that. And I think it's really important that yin teachers all get on the same page. So as long as we can keep educating and then we can teach in, you know, a united way, then we clear up any sort of like misunderstandings about yin yoga.
Awesome. How do we get a hold of you if people watching want to follow your content or if they have any questions for you?
Yeah, the best way is probably Instagram. You can follow me. It's Leah Graw Yoga, and that'll keep you up to date on anything I'm releasing in the near future.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming on. You're a rock star. Everyone's going to love you on here. So your inbox is going to be blasted up, I'm sure.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
All right. Take care, Leah.
Thanks.